So today I want to show you how I make thin moldings with hand tools. Now, I've seen a lot of videos on how to do this using sticking boards, and I use a sticking board as well. But the thing about the videos that I've seen is that they start off with a board like this size, and then they do the moldings on the sticking board, and then at the end they show you a thin molding. And there's a part missing. And the part missing is how to get from this thickness board to this thickness board. Now obviously it's easy to use this type of thick board when you're making a molding and then use a table saw to cut it down and you get your thin molding. But if you don't have a table saw, what do? Well, I have two methods and I'm going to show you that today. But before I get to the tutorial, I have to set up my Moravian workbench outside. If you've been watching any of my recent videos, you will have seen that I'm making a dresser, and that dresser is presently on top of my bench, and I can't get it off because my son has the flu and I need his help to get it outside. So that means I need another workbench. Now luckily, a couple of years ago, I made this Moravian bench. I used a scaffolding adjuster for the leg vise, which turned out pretty well. But on nice days, I like to set this up in the yard and do work outside. So that's what I will be doing today. Unfortunately, the trains will be going by, so it might be a little noisy. So I'm going to apologize for that in advance. Anyway, let's get to the tutorial. So I'm outside today, and the trains are going by, so it might be a little noisy. But let me get started while there's no trains. So the first thing to do is to cut your stock down to the exact size that your molding will be. This is the easiest method because then you don't have to plane anything afterwards. The second thing you need to do is to adjust the fence on your sticking board. And you want the fence such so that when you put the piece of molding wood down, the molding wood will stick out just a hair, like a millimeter or so from the edge of the sticking board. This allows the fence of your plane to ride up against the wood that you're molding and not your sticking board. And the next key to doing really thin moldings is to use double-sided tape. You take a piece maybe about 4 inches or so, look to where the back of your molding is going to be. Zoom out. I can't see that. Dip down a little bit. And right at the back of the molding, you put your double-sided tape. And this will stop the molding from kicking out in the back as you plane towards the front. Stick it in the front, push it up against the fence on the sticking board, and then push that down. Now, you have a little bit of tape sticking out here, so you're going to use an X-Acto knife or something like that to cut off that tape so that it doesn't interfere with the fence of the plane. Now, the next thing you're going to do is make your moldings. And the most important part of this process is to make sure that your plane, in this case my Stanley 55, is set up perfectly. Okay, if it's not set up perfectly, you're going to have a very hard time making moldings, especially the complex moldings. Now, I've set the depth stop up on this plane, but since this is the exact size of my molding, it's only going to hit just a little bit on the edge, and hopefully it'll stop, but I'm going to have to look really carefully, and if it goes beyond that, maybe set the depth stop to the height of the fence on the sticking board. Now, I apologize. This bench, I've never used it for any videos, and I attached the camera to the bench, so you might get a little wobbling as I make the molding, so I apologize for that in advance. All right, so that turned out pretty good. It looks like my piece of wood was a little bit too wide because I have a little lip here on edge and a little lip here from my fence being out a little too far. But these can be broken off pretty easily like that and sanded down, and you have your molding. So the other way I've done moldings in the past is to first make the molding on a thick board and then rip off the molding. Now the problem with that is you're left with a thin strip of molding that has an uneven surface on one side where you ripped it. And it's very difficult to plane because since it has this profile, you can't really put it down flat on anything. Now I guess you could make the reverse mold of your profile, of your molding profile with chisels or whatever like that. I've never done that. And the best way that I've found to plane this after you make a thin molding is to take a block plane, preferably a skew block plane, and put it in the vise upside down like this. Now you don't want to clamp it too hard because you don't want to ruin the body of your plane. And then all you do is push the molding over the plane much like you would an electric jointer. And that will clean up the back edge that you ripped, and you'll be good to go for gluing. Now, depending on what you're putting the molding on, you could possibly plane it after you've attached it. Like if you're going to attach it to a drawer front or something, let's pretend this is a drawer front, then as long as the bottom is flat, and it should be because that's the surface that is in contact with your sticking board when you're making the plane, then after you glue that to the drawer or what have you, you can then plane the top with it affixed. But that means that you have to leave a little bit sticking out on the top that allows you to plane down so that it's flush with the top of the drawer. I don't know. If you want to do it that way, that's another way to do it. But anyway, that's how I make molding with hand planes, and I hope that helped you. So, thanks a lot.